There is a moment that feels almost unreal. The silence that once echoed loudly is suddenly broken by a message, a call, or a simple gesture. And in that moment, your heart may rush ahead of your wisdom. You may feel relief, curiosity, even a quiet hope rising again. But before you respond, you must understand something deeper. Not every return is a resolution, and not every message carries truth. Silence is never empty. It is filled with meaning, avoidance, reflection, fear, or even indifference. When someone disappears emotionally and then returns, they are not just coming back to you, they are coming back to themselves, to unfinished emotions, to unresolved patterns. And how you respond will determine whether you step into clarity or repeat confusion. Do not respond from the wound that missed them. Respond from the awareness that survived without them. When he reaches out after silence, your first instinct might be to welcome him as if nothing happened. But ignoring the silence is ignoring the truth. The space between you was not meaningless, it was a message. And if you erase that message too quickly, you teach him that your emotional presence is always available, regardless of how he handles your absence. Instead, pause. Let your response come from stillness, not urgency. You are not obligated to match his timing. If he had the freedom to disappear, you have the right to take your time to respond with intention. This is not about playing games. It is about reclaiming your emotional ground. You must also listen, not just to what he says, but to what he avoids. Words are easy after distance. Anyone can return with charm, apologies, or explanations. But truth reveals itself in consistency, not in a single moment of effort. Ask yourself, does his return carry responsibility or just curiosity? Do not punish, but do not forget. There is a difference between being open and being unguarded. You can welcome communication without abandoning your boundaries. You can be kind without becoming accessible to the same cycle. And most importantly, ask yourself the question that matters more than anything he says: has anything truly changed? Because sometimes people return not because they are ready, but because they are familiar with you. And familiarity can feel like connection, but it is not the same as growth. If you respond, let it be with calm strength. Let your words reflect someone who has learned something in the silence, someone who no longer chases clarity but embodies it, because the real power is not in whether he comes back. The real power is in who you have become while he was gone. When someone reappears after a period of silence, the emotional body reacts faster than the rational mind. There is a sudden rush, relief, curiosity, longing, even a quiet validation that you were not forgotten. These feelings are natural, but they are also deceptive if they are allowed to take control. Emotion in its raw state seeks immediate expression. It wants to close the gap, to restore connection, to erase the discomfort of absence. But reacting in that state often leads to responses that reflect the wound, not the wisdom you gained during the silence. The space that once existed gave you perspective, even if it was painful. It showed you how it feels to be without their presence, how you adapted, how you coped, and perhaps how you grew stronger in ways you did not expect. If you respond impulsively, you risk abandoning that growth in a single moment. You return to a version of yourself that is driven by need rather than awareness. And when that happens, the dynamic resets, often repeating the same pattern that caused the silence in the first place. There is a subtle but powerful difference between feeling something and being led by it. Emotions are signals, not commands. They are meant to be understood, not obeyed without question. When you feel the urge to respond immediately, to explain yourself, to welcome them back without hesitation, pause and observe that urge. Ask yourself what it is rooted in. Is it genuine clarity, or is it the fear of losing them again? Is it self-respect, or is it the desire for reassurance? Time creates space for truth to emerge. When you delay your response, even slightly, you allow the intensity of the moment to settle. In that stillness, you begin to see more clearly, not just what they are saying, but how it aligns with what you have already experienced. You give yourself the opportunity to respond in a way that reflects your values, your boundaries, and your self-worth. Acting from emotion alone often prioritizes immediate comfort over long-term clarity. It feels good in the moment, but it can cost you your sense of control and understanding. When you choose to respond from a grounded place instead, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer reacting to them, you are choosing yourself. Silence is often misunderstood as emptiness, as if nothing is happening beneath its surface. But in reality, silence is filled with unspoken truths. When someone withdraws and creates distance without explanation, that absence becomes a form of communication. It may not be direct or comfortable, but it reveals something that words often conceal. It reflects hesitation, uncertainty, emotional unavailability, or even an internal conflict they are not ready to confront. To ignore that silence is to ignore a crucial part of the connection's reality. In moments of silence, patterns become visible. You begin to notice who reaches out and who retreats, who seeks understanding and who avoids it. The lack of communication is not neutral, it carries weight. It shows how someone handles discomfort, how they respond to emotional intensity, and whether they are capable of staying present when things become real. These are not small details. They define the foundation of any meaningful relationship. It is tempting to minimize the silence once it ends, especially when the other person returns with words that seem reassuring. The mind wants to focus on the present interaction, to accept the return as a positive sign and move forward without looking back. But the past does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient. The silence happened and it had an impact. It shaped your emotions, your thoughts, and your perception of the connection. If you pretend it held no meaning, you deny your own experience. Silence also creates a mirror. In that space, you are left with your own thoughts, your own interpretations, and your own emotional responses. It forces you to confront what you felt in their absence, whether it was anxiety, peace, confusion, or clarity. That internal reaction is just as important as their external behavior. It tells you what the connection evokes within you and whether it aligns with the kind of emotional stability you seek. When someone returns after silence, their presence may feel like an answer, but it does not erase the question that silence created. Instead of rushing past it, there is value in holding on to that question a little longer. What did their absence show you? What did it reveal about their readiness, their consistency, and their ability to communicate? And equally important, what did it reveal about your own needs and boundaries? Silence, when understood, becomes a teacher. It may not speak in words, but it speaks in patterns, in absence, and in emotional impact. Those who learn to listen to it gain a deeper awareness, one that prevents them from confusing temporary attention with genuine connection. When someone reaches out after a period of silence, there is often an unspoken pressure to respond quickly, as if their return demands your immediate attention. This pressure does not always come from them directly. It arises within you, a conditioned instinct to be available, to keep the connection alive, to not miss the moment. But this urgency is worth questioning because it can quietly place their timing above your own emotional rhythm. Their absence operated on their terms. They took space when they felt like it, responded when they chose to, and disconnected without needing your permission. If that freedom existed for them, it must also exist for you. You are not required to collapse your time, your thoughts, and your boundaries simply because they have decided to reappear. Immediate availability, when it is not genuine, becomes a form of self-abandonment disguised as kindness. There is power in allowing yourself to pause, not as a strategy, not as a way to create distance or provoke a reaction, but as a way to return to yourself before engaging again. A delayed response creates space for emotional balance. It gives you time to observe your internal state, to understand what you feel without being rushed into expressing it. In that pause, your response becomes a choice rather than a reflex. Being constantly available can unintentionally communicate that your presence is guaranteed, regardless of how inconsistently you are treated. It removes the natural sense of accountability from the connection. When someone knows they can disappear and return without any shift in your accessibility, the pattern often repeats, not because they intend harm, but because nothing has required them to grow beyond it. Choosing not to respond immediately is not about withholding or punishing. It is about aligning your actions with your self-respect. You are allowing your response to carry weight, to come from a place that is steady rather than reactive. It also sets a subtle tone that your time and energy are not governed by someone else's sudden reappearance. There is also a deeper shift that happens within you when you release the need to be instantly present. You move from seeking connection to evaluating it. Instead of asking, how quickly should I reply so I don't lose this, you begin to ask, what kind of interaction am I stepping back into? That question changes everything because it places awareness before action. Availability, when it is real, comes from willingness, not pressure. And when you choose your timing with intention, you protect not only your peace but the integrity of how you show up. When someone returns after silence, words often arrive polished, intentional, and carefully chosen. They may explain their absence, express regret, or speak in a way that feels reassuring and sincere. In that moment, it is easy to be drawn into what is being said because words can create a sense of clarity that was missing before. They offer structure to confusion and give you something tangible to hold on to. But words, no matter how convincing, are only one layer of truth, and often the easiest one to present. Actions exist on a different level. They require effort, consistency, and a willingness to follow through beyond a single moment of communication. While words can be shaped in an instant, actions unfold over time, revealing patterns that cannot be easily disguised. This is why observing behavior becomes essential, especially after a period of silence. What someone does after they return carries far more weight than what they say in the moment of re-entry. It's important to notice whether their actions align with their words. Do they communicate consistently, or do they fall back into unpredictability once the initial reconnection fades? Do they acknowledge the silence to change behavior, or do they act as though nothing significant happened? These details may seem small, but they form the true foundation of trust. Without consistency, even the most meaningful words lose their substance. There is also a tendency to interpret effort based on intention rather than reality. You might want to believe that their words reflect genuine change, especially if you have been waiting for that shift. But intention without action remains incomplete. It exists as potential, not proof, and relying on potential often leads to repeating cycles where hope replaces observation and expectation replaces evidence. When you focus on actions, you move away from assumptions and toward clarity. You no longer have to guess what they feel or what they mean, because their behavior begins to answer those questions for you. It removes the need to analyze every message or search for hidden meanings in their words. Instead, you observe what is consistently present and what is consistently missing. This approach also strengthens your sense of self-trust. Rather than being swayed by emotional language or temporary reassurance, you ground yourself in what is real and observable. You begin to recognize that genuine connection is not built on what is promised, but on what is practiced. Over time, this awareness protects you from becoming attached to words that are not supported by lasting change. When someone returns after silence, there can be an internal conflict between protecting yourself and staying open. Part of you may feel the need to guard your emotions, to ensure that you are not hurt in the same way again. Another part may still carry warmth, curiosity, or even care for the person who has come back. The challenge is not choosing one over the other, but learning how to hold both without allowing either to become extreme. This is where boundaries take shape, not as walls built from anger, but as quiet decisions rooted in self-respect. Bitterness often emerges when pain is left unprocessed. It can disguise itself as strength, making you feel in control, when in reality, it keeps you emotionally tied to what hurt you. If you respond from that place, your words may carry hidden resentment, even if they appear calm on the surface. And while that may feel justified, it can also distort your clarity. You are no longer responding to what is happening now, you are reacting to what has already happened. Boundaries, on the other hand, are not reactions. They are conscious choices about what you allow and what you no longer accept. They do not need to be loud or defensive to be effective. In fact, the strongest boundaries are often the quietest ones, expressed through consistent behavior rather than explanation. You do not have to prove your boundaries to anyone. You simply have to honor them within yourself. It is possible to be kind without being overly accessible. You can listen without immediately trusting, engage without fully reopening the same emotional space, and respond without offering the same level of closeness that once existed. This balance allows you to remain grounded while still being open to understanding what has changed. If anything has Letting go of bitterness does not mean dismissing what you felt or pretending that the silence did not affect you. It means you have processed enough of it that it no longer controls how you show up. You are not trying to punish the other person, nor are you trying to protect your ego. You are simply acting in alignment with what you have learned. There is a certain calm strength in this approach. It shifts the dynamic from emotional reaction to intentional presence. Instead of being pulled into old patterns, you stand in a place where your actions reflect your growth. You do not need to close yourself off completely, but you also do not return to the same openness without awareness. In maintaining boundaries without bitterness, you reclaim control over your emotional space. You respond not from pain, but from understanding, allowing your presence to remain steady regardless of what unfolds next. When someone returns after a period of silence, the moment can feel like a new beginning. There may be a sense of relief, a renewed curiosity, or even a quiet hope that things will be different this time. But beneath that surface lies a question that cannot be ignored. Has anything truly changed, or is this simply a continuation of what already was? Without asking this, it becomes easy to step back into the same dynamic, guided more by familiarity than by awareness. Change is not something that can be assumed based on a single message or a brief interaction. It reveals itself through patterns, through consistent behavior, and through a noticeable shift in how someone shows up over time. Words may suggest growth, but real change carries a different weight. It reflects in accountability, in effort, and in the ability to do things differently than before, especially in situations that once led to distance or silence. It is important to observe whether the reasons behind the silence have been addressed or simply overlooked. If the same conditions still exist, avoidance, inconsistency, lack of communication, then the return may not represent growth, but rather a temporary desire for connection. In such cases, the pattern is likely to repeat no matter how promising the initial interaction may feel. Recognizing this requires honesty with yourself, even when the truth is inconvenient. There is also a deeper layer to this question, one that turns inward. While you are evaluating whether they have changed, you must also consider whether you have changed in how you respond. Growth is not only about what the other person does differently, but also about what you no longer tolerate and what you now require for your emotional well-being. If your standards, boundaries, and self-awareness have evolved, then the connection must meet you at that level, or it will no longer align. Asking whether anything has truly changed is not about skepticism or doubt for the sake of protection. It is about clarity. It allows you to engage without losing sight of your own experience. Instead of being carried by the emotion of the moment, you remain grounded in observation and understanding. This question also creates space between impulse and action. Rather than immediately reinvesting emotionally, you give yourself time to see what unfolds. You allow reality to reveal itself instead of deciding too quickly based on hope or memory. Over time, this approach strengthens your ability to trust not just others, but your own perception. In the end, the answer to whether anything has changed is rarely found in what is said at the beginning, but in what is consistently done afterward. In the end, what matters is not the message you receive, but the meaning you choose to give it. Not every return is an invitation to reopen your heart in the same way it once was. Sometimes it is simply a moment of clarity, a chance to see with wiser eyes what you once felt with unquestioned emotion. You are no longer the same person who sat in that silence wondering, waiting, or trying to understand what was never clearly given. You have seen what absence feels like. You have learned what inconsistency does to your peace. And that awareness is not something to abandon the moment they come back. It is something to carry with you, quietly and firmly. If you choose to respond, let it come from strength, not longing. Let it reflect the version of you that grew in the absence, not the one that once tolerated confusion. And if you choose not to engage in the same way again, let that choice be free of guilt. Not every connection is meant to be continued, even if it once felt meaningful, because the true transformation is not in whether they return, it is in whether you still meet them from the same place or from a higher one.